on an all-new Dr. Phil. Suicide or murder? Shocking updates on the Rebecca Zahau case.
Has her family proven Rebecca was murdered?
The brother of her millionaire boyfriend.
He tied up her legs, he tied her hands behind her back, he tied a noose around her neck and tied the rope to the bed.
Found liable for her death.
I've been living with, horrible false accusations.
This was not about money, because no money is going to bring my sister back.
Exclusive new details.
A knife was found when I hold it behind my back. The fingerprints all come into place.
So she's in defense mode.
And so she's trying to escape, then he strangled her.
For 7 years, we've been following the mysterious death of beautiful Rebecca Zahau, who was found bound, gagged, and hanging naked from the balcony of her boyfriend's multi-million-dollar mansion. Now, police ruled Rebecca's death a suicide, but her family says she would never have taken her own life. Today, a shocking update. Has her family finally proven what they have believed all along, that Rebecca was murdered? Police believe Rebecca killed herself in a fit of grief and guilt just 2 days after her boyfriend's 6-year-old son, Max, fell from a second-floor landing while in her care and later died at the hospital. Investigators claimed Rebecca blamed herself for the young boy's tragic death. But when Rebecca's sister Mary and her brother-in-law Doug were on the show, they claimed the evidence proved foul play, and they believed that it was her boyfriend's brother who killed Rebecca. And they believe the motive was sex.
32-year-old Rebecca Zahau was found hanging nude and bound from a balcony in the mansion's courtyard.
Investigators tonight are still trying to determine how 32-year-old Rebecca died.
It was her boyfriend's brother who found the woman hanging over a balcony.
Jack Knight was the only one home when he found Zahau's body hanging at that Coronado mansion.
An emergency, what are you reporting?
I got a girl hung herself.
Is she still alive?
You're alive.
When was the last time you saw her?
Last night.
What is your name?
I'm Jack Knight.
Adam removed a blue cloth which had been in her mouth after he cut her down from a second-floor balcony. Zahau, who was naked, had her feet and hands bound by red rope, which authorities believe she had tied herself.
Zahau's nude body was found just days after her boyfriend's son took a fall at the home that would end his life.
According to family members, Rebecca Zahau was watching over Max at the time.
She heard a loud noise and she came out of the bathroom to check what that noise was. Becky found Max on the floor. She told me that he was unconscious and she did CPR.
I saw my son Max laying on the ground near the front door, being attended by some paramedics.
And was Rebecca there?
She was.
She felt horrible. She said it was something that she couldn't have prevented.
Jonas Shacknight says Rebecca killed herself because she felt responsible for the accidental death of his 6-year-old son, Max, just 2 days earlier.
Investigators have determined that 32-year-old Rebecca Zahau committed suicide.
Was Rebecca's death a homicide? The answer is no, it was a suicide.
The Zahau family does not believe that she committed suicide.
As soon as I found out that she was naked and she was bound, it confirmed my fear that she did not commit suicide. She was murdered. They did not give my sister a fair investigation.
On the door leading into the room where Becky was killed, it was in black paint, and it said, "She saved him. Can you save her?"
It's all in third person, and it does not make sense. My sister writes everything very elaborately. So if she's gonna leave a message, that is not gonna be the message. They don't know where the rope came from. There were 2 knives in the room. One knife had her fingerprint, but the other knife is clean of prints. The knife had to get there somehow. This is a staged homicide. There was a chair knocked over in the room.
There was no evidence of a struggle or sexual assault, and there were no other significant injuries.
Well, I would think a chair knocked over is signs of struggle. Our family came to Dr. Phil to find out the truth of Becky's death.
How does she tie her hands behind her back with that elaborate knotting?
We said this would take a Cirque du Soleil contortionist artist to do this.
Becky wouldn't strip herself naked, bind herself in that manner, and definitely not for the world to see. She wouldn't do that. She just wouldn't.
26-year-old Patricia Lanham agreed to reenact the Zahau hanging scenario. This is the same type of rope that detectives say Zahau cut into 3 pieces and tied to the foot of a bed. Another section of rope she used to tie her ankles, wrapping it several times in a figure-8 pattern, according to investigators. Next, the noose, a simple slip knot. Then detectives say she used a long-sleeve shirt to gag herself. Investigators believe Zahau bound her wrists using the same figure-8 pattern, first in front of her body. Then she would have slipped one hand out and reinserted it into the ropes behind her back. While bound and gagged, Zahau would have hopped across the bedroom. Detectives say Zahau leans forward and falls over the balcony head first. A 9-foot drop before the rope snaps tight.
What is the likelihood that she would present herself at death completely nude?
There is no way that she would go in this manner.
Rebecca's family buried her, but they knew she would never rest in peace until justice was served. 3 months after she died, they made the difficult decision to exhume her body and perform a second autopsy. They hoped new evidence would be the key to proving she was brutally murdered. The second postmortem was performed by famed medical examiner Dr. Cyril Wecht. Take a look. For the past 3.5 months, the body of Rebecca Zahau has rested peacefully in St. Joseph, Missouri. This footage provided by the funeral home shows Rebecca's burial vault lifted from the ground. Her sealed tomb is then pried open to reveal her beautifully adorned casket. The body is then shipped across the country to one of the top forensic pathologists, Dr. Cyril Wecht in Pittsburgh. He begins the autopsy.
Superficial abrasions on her back and legs appeared consistent with impact with large plants. The hands, fingers, and fingernails show no injuries. No rib fractures are noted, period.
We picked Dr. Cyril Wecht because of his history in well-known cases such as John F. Kennedy, John Benet Ramsey, Anna Nicole Smith.
I think a week and a half, I should have my opinions and conclusions ready to submit to the family.
Rebecca's family says the pain of exhuming her body from its final resting place was worth it in the end. Here's why. Having reviewed the autopsy, did they do a good job?
The findings lead me to express grave and serious doubts about the conclusion that the manner of death was suicide. You've got 4 separate hemorrhages beneath the scalp.
What does that mean to you?
It cries out for an explanation.
You were concerned about an absence of severe injury to the neck area, true?
Yes, I believe if the body had just plummeted down with that sheer drop of several feet, then the cervical vertebrae would have been dislocated from the base of the skull, and that was not present. How does somebody go about binding the hands in a slipknot arrangement, binding their calves, putting a rope around their neck, then the shirt over the rope 3 times and stuffing it in their mouth? And then she gets up with her 5-foot 4-inch frame on top of a 36-inch balcony, and she plummets off that balcony, and she does so nude. In all of my autopsies, I can't remember a case where a woman commits suicide nude in an outdoor environment. Women just do not do these things.
Do you see a basis for reopening this investigation and moving forward with all due effort to try to determine what's happened?
Yes, I lean very strongly toward it being a homicide.
She shouldn't be dead. She should be here with us.
After Dr. Wecht's findings, Rebecca's family filed a civil lawsuit against Adam Shacknai, alleging that he was responsible for her death. Now, after years of fighting against San Diego County Sheriff's Department and the very wealthy Shacknai family, Mary says she finally feels vindicated after the civil jury ruled Adam liable for Rebecca's death.
My family and I have been fighting every day for the last 7 years to try to bring Adam Shacknai to court. I believe that Adam Shacknai murdered my sister all along. Fighting Adam Shacknai and his team of attorneys was like David fighting Goliath.
Shacknai's defense attorney says there is no evidence his client did anything.
Their hope was that we would never go to court. We are grateful to Dr. Phil for helping us get that second opinion on her autopsy, which helped us in our civil trial.
They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against her boyfriend's brother, who was the only other person at the mansion when she died.
The attorney for the Zahau family told jurors in opening statements they will prove during the civil trial that Rebecca was murdered.
The fracture of the cricoid bone is consistent with a manual strangulation.
Testifying was hard for me. My sister was murdered. It is pretty obvious she was murdered. It was very emotional and it was stressful.
Keith Greer, the Zahau family attorney, used a new mannequin to depict Zahau, explaining what they think happened.
What we allege is that there was a confrontation that went awry. Action was taken here by way of striking Rebecca Zahau on the head, making her at least semi-unconscious.
The man at the center of a lawsuit takes the stand. Rebecca Zahau's family believes Adam Shacknai killed her.
Did you participate ever in any act to harm or kill Rebecca Zahau?
Most certainly not.
Did you hit Rebecca on the head?
I never hit Rebecca on the head, or anywhere else for that matter.
Greer summed up the reasons the jury should conclude Shacknai killed Zahau for sexually assaulting her, then strangling her, and then hitting her on the head 4 times. Authorities say she committed suicide, but Greer says Shacknai staged it to cover up her murder.
We contend, ladies and gentlemen, that this sends a message anything other than suicide.
I believe the jury deliberated a little over 5 hours.
For the record, all 12 jurors present in the matter of Zahau versus Shacknai.
I definitely was preparing myself for the worst.
The jury reached a verdict.
I said, God, if this is a no, help me accept it and move on.
Did Adam Shacknai touch Rebecca Zahau with the intent to harm her? The answer is yes.
In a stunning verdict, a jury has found the brother of her millionaire boyfriend responsible for her death,
awarding her family $5 million in damages.
Finally, to hear it from the jury saying yes was like, oh my gosh, I don't have to keep doing this. My sister was brutally murdered. She tried to escape, and just the thought that she knew she was gonna die breaks my heart. It just rips my heart out.
Now the dead woman's family is urging officials to reopen the criminal case.
Well, next, Rebecca's family is here, speaking out for the first time since their victory in court. They say they'll keep fighting until Adam Shacknai is behind bars.
Coming up.
I'm not worried about these posers.
He got up there and called us posers. He can't even say sorry.
Tomorrow, a love triangle.
My wife cheated on me with my best friend.
An angry daughter.
You sleep with his friend in his house, in front of his kids.
A critical decision.
You told the children that I have to choose between my partner or my kids.
So you're the victim here.
Yes.
You're out in the Winnebago with your boyfriend and your daughter's watching it rocking. How does that make you a victim?
Then on Thursday.
My twin sister was supposed to be my maid of honor.
Torn between her fiance and her twin.
I'm a heroin addict.
So she's going to be shooting up before you get married.
That's Thursday.
Adam Shacknai finally testified in great detail about finding his brother's girlfriend, Rebecca Zahau, hanging from a balcony of this Coronado mansion.
Did you ever do anything at any time to participate in the death of Rebecca Zahau?
Most certainly not.
Did you participate ever in any act to harm or kill Rebecca Zahau?
Most certainly not.
It's the mysterious case of Rebecca Zahau, who was found hanging naked from the balcony of her boyfriend's mansion, gagged, with her hands and feet bound. Her wealthy boyfriend's brother, Adam, was staying in the mansion's guest house at the time of her death and was the one who discovered her body. But Rebecca's family has always claimed he did much more. Now, after years of fighting for justice, a California court agreed with her family and found Adam Shacknai civilly liable for Rebecca's death. But he says he is not worried about the verdict because Rebecca's family, quote, got lucky. Take a look.
I watched Adam Shacknai do a press conference outside of the courthouse steps. After the verdict, he called us posers, and we got away once, and we won't get away with it again.
I'm standing tall. I'm not worried about these posers. They got away with something once. They got lucky. They say it's better to be lucky than good. They got lucky one time. I don't think they're going to get lucky. A lot worse things have happened to a lot better people, so this is nothing to me. Disappointed, but I got plenty of fight in me. I got plenty of health.
He didn't get up there and say, I'm sorry. He just got up there and gave excuses. The jury made sure that Rebecca got justice, and that's all that matters.
Well, we've been covering this case since the beginning, and today Rebecca's family is speaking out in an exclusive interview since this shocking update. Now, Rebecca's sister Mary and her husband Doug are here, and also joining is their attorney Keith Greer. So it's good to see you. Tell me how you feel about this verdict.
Well, it was a big relief. When the jury said, yes, they found him guilty, it was like a rock being lifted off our chest.
Right. And how long did they deliberate?
I think between 4 and 5 hours.
The only moment of doubt was when the jury came back so quick.
Right.
Because typically that means it's going to be a defense verdict. And then they came back in our favor, which is great.
And then he made statements at the press conference. What was your reaction to that when he's talking about your sister?
He got up there and called us posers, and to me, it was almost like a threat. He basically said that we got away with it once, and we're not going to be so lucky to get away with it again. He can't even say sorry. All he said was that he has been found innocent by the law enforcement, and that's the ground that he's standing on.
Right. And there was a civil award. You asked for 1 penny in damages, which you actually got, but then there was more to it than that.
This is not about money. And so we actually asked the jury to come up with the amount that they thought was appropriate to award my mother. And the jury came up with the number on their own.
Okay, why the 1 penny? To make the point that this was not about the money?
Yes, sir.
How long did the trial go on?
The trial went on for 6 weeks.
Right. Keith, can you walk us through it?
We were always very confident we were going to win this case. But what was really interesting is I talked to a juror. They'd actually decided the day before that Adam was guilty. Within a couple of hours, that had occurred. The next day, they just came back to talk about the money. So that was, I think that's another showing that the evidence here was very strong.
Pretty overwhelming. Spending a lot of time in trials myself, I've always said that your story goes a whole lot better if you're the only one telling it. And that's not the case in a trial. There's another side, and the defense presented a vigorous defense here. And their defense was that there were 29 witnesses and no testimony whatsoever that Adam harmed Rebecca. They said there was no evidence that he hit her head 4 times, strangled, bound, and threw her off the balcony, that Rebecca's footprints were the only ones that were on the balcony, that there was no Adam DNA, fingerprints, or footprints that were found, that according to the DNA expert, everyone sheds DNA. How did you explain that? How did you counter that?
Well, see, what they're saying is there's no Adam DNA, no Adam fingerprints. And that's true. But what's also true is there's nobody's DNA. There's nobody's fingerprints. You know, on the paintbrush that was used to paint the phrase on the door, she saved him, can you save her? No fingerprints, no DNA. On the paint
brush.
On the brush, on the tube of paint, which I think you might have over there. Whoever painted that door had to squeeze that tube 20 times. If you hold that, you will see your fingerprints when you take. You don't need a magnifying glass. You can see them right on there. So that, you would expect that to be covered with fingerprints and DNA.
So this had to be squeezed 20 times in order to write out what was written on the door.
Right. Yet.
And you're saying that the significance is not that there weren't Adam's fingerprints or DNA, there were no fingerprints or DNA. So where were Becky's?
Right, so did a ghost do it? Oh, there was one fingerprint on the very top on the cap.
Right, it was up
Becky's.
here. Yeah, it was up here on top. But even to do this, you have to touch it. You can't have it down and try and close that. I don't know how you could do that without having to squeeze this.
So this was cleaned, is your theory, to get rid of their DNA, and in so doing, they cleaned everyone's DNA off of it, everyone's fingerprints off of it.
And the same is true with the doorknobs going in and out of the room.
This was the brush.
Yeah, and with that too, you can see your fingerprints on that when you touch it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it when I touch it here.
And the handle itself has a rougher surface, so you'd expect DNA to be able to attach to it. And
you'd expect contact DNA at least here.
No fingerprints, no DNA.
And you cross-examined their experts, right? How did they explain nobody's DNA, nobody's fingerprints?
They didn't. I think that's what the jury saw there.
So what do Rebecca's family think really happened that fateful day? What did they think the timeline was and how that actually unfolded? We'll talk about it after the break.
Coming up.
A knife of this type was found in the room. It may have been used to cut the ropes. It was really odd because the thumb was on this side. You can't cut that way, but if you put it behind your back, that's how you cut.
She's trying to escape.
The jury came back with the judgment against Adam for $5.1 million.
Adam Shacknight does not have money. And even if he had money, this was not about money. I have declined multiple offers to settle. I am pursuing justice because no money is going to bring my sister back.
Well, since Rebecca Zahau's mysterious death, her sister Mary and brother-in-law Doug have been fighting to get police to reopen her case and rule her death a homicide so there can be a criminal trial. Now, they say evidence supports their theory that Rebecca was murdered by her boyfriend's brother, Adam Shacknight. Now, understand, he denies this 100%. He says absolutely not, did not happen. That notwithstanding, you say you fully believe that he is responsible for her death, correct?
Yes, I do.
And Keith, what do you think happened? How do you think this took place?
Early that evening, where this all started was in the shower of the master bedroom, which has glass doors on it. And there's one drop of Rebecca's menstrual blood, we believe, on the floor there. Something happens then, and she winds up on the opposite side of the house with her cell phone and with a towel wrapped around her that winds up getting dropped on the floor right outside the bedroom where she's murdered. The crime scene photos show that the towel is on the ground right next to 4 more drops of blood, so she must have stood there for a while the confrontation occurred, and then when it got out of control, she dropped the towel, she ran to try and escape, she screamed for help. The screams were heard by a neighbor. At that point in time, she struck on the back of the head 4 times, which, according to Dr. Weck, would be sufficient to render her at least partially unconscious, if not totally unconscious. We think at that point in time, her legs were taped together because there is tape residue on her shins, on both legs. She was gagged and bound. We believe then that sometime after that, then, she is sexually assaulted because of a smear mark on her left inner thigh, which is a transfer mark from the smaller steak knife.
Okay, and it's this knife.
It was interesting with this, and you could see this in the police photos. You see the 3 rivets that are here? Mm-hmm. On the photos, this rivet's red. The bottom rivet is red on the police photo, and they thought that was blood. The other side also had red on the rivet, and they showed it was Rebecca's blood because they swabbed it. Our expert looked at it and then said, hey, if there's blood on this side and there's blood on this side, I bet there's blood on all sides, because she was concerned this may have been a sexual assault. After that, he painted the saying on the door, you know, she saved him, can you save her? He went downstairs, he got the red ski rope there, which he then cut into a few pieces. He tied up her legs, he tied her hands behind her back, he tied a noose around her neck and tied the rope to the bed. That's the exact type of rope that was used. Yeah. Now, we allege that she woke up after she was unconscious and after she'd been tied up already, and she attempted to escape. And in part we base it on is on the knife that's right next to you there. A knife of this type was found in the room, may have been used to cut the ropes. But the sheriff said that, again, only Rebecca's fingerprints are found on the knife, so it must have been Rebecca who did this. But it was really odd because the fingerprints were on it like this, with the sharp part pointing towards you. It just doesn't make sense. But then when I go like this and hold it behind my back, the fingerprints all come into place. Another part that was unusual was Her thumbprint was on it, and if you were going to cut with a knife, you'd have your thumb on this side, and you'd be cutting downward, right? But the thumb was on this side. You can't cut that way. You can't cut your leg, right? It comes right off. But if you put it behind your back, that's how you cut. And so all of a sudden, and again, there's no DNA, no fingerprints on the handle. It was wiped, but he didn't wipe off the blade, and the blade reflected that thumb with it being held in this position. She was trying to get that to cut herself free.
So she's in defense mode at this time. She's trying to escape. You think she's been captured and she's trying...
She's a fighter, and so she's trying to escape, and we believe at that point in time, then he strangled her.
I know it's been 7 years. It's got to be terrible to have to hear these details. How do you feel when you hear about that?
It's really tough. It's tough, but I know it has to be done. And if I have to do one more day, one more year to get closer to justice for her, then I'll do it. But it still breaks my heart.
Coming up, what did Adam say on the 911 call that Rebecca's family says proves he's lying? We'll talk about that after the break.
Coming up.
I got a girl hung herself. I'm compressing her chest right now.
What's your reaction to how he sounds on that 911 call?
He's lying. I believe that Adam Shacknai murdered my sister all along. I had mentioned that to the detective. We were just brushed off as unrealistic people. The San Diego Sheriff's Department got on TV and said, I have to accept the reality and face the fact that my sister committed suicide.
Our office concluded that the cause of death was hanging and the manner of death was suicide.
We won't be able to get a criminal trial unless the case is reopened.
Shacknai says that he is not concerned about the Sheriff's Department being open to looking at new evidence in this case or the chance that there could possibly be reopening of this case down the road.
We are going to continue this fight until Adam Shacknai goes to prison.
On July 13th, 2011, 32-year-old Rebecca Zahau was found dead. She was nude and hanging from the balcony of her boyfriend's California mansion. After a 7-week-long investigation, her death was officially ruled a suicide. Yet Rebecca's family claimed she would never have taken her own life. Now, they're here today alongside their attorney, Keith Greer. Now, Adam Shacknai was the one who discovered Rebecca's body. Now, he called 911 and told them he was doing chest compressions to try and save her. But Rebecca's family says if that's true, why was none of his DNA found on her body? Well, here's his 911 call. Let's take a listen.
Emergency, what are you reporting?
Yeah, I got a girl hung herself.
Okay, sir, is she still alive?
You're alive?
When was the last time you saw her?
Last night.
Okay, is she beyond help?
I'm compressing her chest right now.
Okay, hold on. What's your name?
Adam Shacknai.
Okay, listen to me. Help is coming right now.
What's your reaction to how he sounds on that 911 call?
He's lying. Just the way he says it. I used to be an ICU nurse. I have done CPR in the past. And the way he relates to it and the way he sounds and what he's saying doesn't match up to somebody who's truly doing CPR. For example, his phone still sounds like right in front of his mouth. You cannot do CPR with a phone right in front of your mouth. There's no way. And you definitely can't do CPR with the phone on you if you're trying to do a chest compression.
Now, when he cut her down, was there DNA on the rope where he grabbed it and cut it?
No.
Okay.
Or on the gag that he allegedly took out of her mouth.
Took out of her mouth.
No DNA.
What's happened now is the case has not been reopened, correct? But they've appointed a new team to review this?
Yeah, San Diego Sheriff Gore has put together a team of other sheriff's officers that were not involved in the original investigation and have agreed to reanalyze it and make a determination on where they're going to go with the investigation.
All right, next, the world-renowned pathologist who conducted Rebecca's second autopsy joins us with what he discovered that he believes proves Rebecca was murdered. We'll be right back.
Tomorrow on on an all-new Dr. Phil. A love triangle.
My wife cheated on me with my best friend.
He didn't break up our marriage. You did.
You sleep with his friend in his house, in front of his kids.
Well, this ain't the Brady Bunch.
That's tomorrow.
I've been living with, horrible false accusations. And yeah, they bother me, but I'll say this. The people I come in contact with, be it friends, co-workers, acquaintances, strangers, it's very gratifying to know that I've never come across one who thought for a second that I had anything to do with it. And yeah, it bothers me, but it doesn't bother anybody else because they know me.
Well, after insisting her death was suspicious, Rebecca Zahau's family made the difficult decision to have her body exhumed. Now, they had a second autopsy performed by world-renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Sarah Wecht. Now, he joins us today via Polycom.
Dr. Phil, nice to be with you, sir.
Well, it's good to talk to you again. So, have you been following the civil proceeding?
Yes, I followed it very closely. This case is certainly among the top 5 to 6 in my entire career that have meant so much to me because of what I believe was a cover-up and a rush to judgment. But in any event, I dealt with the scientific findings, and they were quite clear. As has been pointed out, the fracture of the cricoid cartilage beneath the Adam's apple, that was fractured. The cricoid cartilage is rarely fractured in cases of hanging, but frequently fractured in cases of manual strangulation. Then you've got that tremendous force. She just jumped off 9 feet, 2 inches below the balcony. Then you would well have partial decapitation. You definitely would have a fracture or dislocation of the cervical vertebrae. That part of the neck was completely clear. No hemorrhage, no fracture, no dislocation, nothing. And I want to say this, Dr. Phil, that I've done about 20,000 autopsies. I cannot remember a case in which a woman committed suicide completely naked. Women do not do this. And then this 5'2" woman getting herself up over a 3-foot balcony with the ankles bound so tightly that there were bruises of the calf muscles, the wrist tied behind her back, and then the ligature around her neck, and a long sleeve shirt overlying the ligature with a sleeve stuffed into her mouth. I am astounded that the law enforcement people and the medical examiner there signed this case off as they did as a suicide. I was delighted to hear the verdict. And one more thing, Dr. Phil, if I may say, talking about the absence of all of that DNA. We have an axiom which forensic pathologists should be reminded of, and the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Any touching, as you have said, Dr. Phil, is going to result in some transference of something, even if we shake hands. There's no other explanation but to conclude that someone have to have cleared all of that physical material, whatever it might have been. So it's, for me, a strong case, and the jury verdict indicates that they felt the same way.
Well, doctor, does this case need to be reopened?
Yes, Dr. Phil, I believe that it does.
Dr. Wecht, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Well, coming up, was Rebecca devastated over her boyfriend's 6-year-old son Max's accident? Now, the police theory was that her guilt drove her to take her own life, so we're going to talk about that next. Ever since her death in 2011, Rebecca Zahau's family has maintained she did not commit suicide. Now, they believe without a shadow of a doubt that she was murdered. After a dramatic civil trial, jurors found Rebecca's boyfriend's brother, Adam Shacknai, was liable for her death. And they're asking now that this case be reopened and just re-examine the evidence. And it seems to me that this all emanated from an early belief that your sister blamed herself and felt guilty that somehow she was responsible for Max getting hurt under her care. That their belief was that she was so upset about it that she took her own life. But you say that she didn't blame herself for this. She realized this was an accident.
That's correct. She was upset about it, but not upset to kill herself. And the only people that came up with that theory was Jonah Shacknai and the sheriff's department. They all came to that conclusion that she was upset enough to kill herself, but they had no proof. And the only thing that they could say was that Jonah Shacknai called her 12:50-ish in the middle of the night and left the message that not a single person have heard. And
well,
nobody knows what that message says.
She sent you a text message.
That's correct.
And the text message was a final text message, we now know. This was July 11th, 2011. She said in part, quote, "It's a nightmare, and partially it's hard for me because I love him like my own, but he's not, and I need to be strong for Jonah." How did you interpret that when you received it?
I interpret that she wants to be strong for people around her. She wants to be the person who uplifts the person who's down and be supportive. And she had plans to help the family. And then when she was done helping, she was planning to come home to us in Missouri.
She seemed to be forward thinking,
Exactly.
which is psychologically inconsistent with suicide. Now, Rebecca's family says she was religious and she never would have committed suicide. Now, her boyfriend Jonah testified in the civil trial, and he gave some conflicting information. Take a look.
During your entire relationship with Rebecca, did Rebecca ever attend church?
Maybe once or twice.
She did not attend church on a regular basis during that entire 2 years.
No.
Rebecca, I think, had a visceral dislike for organized religion based on her experiences growing up.
And by the way, based on what she told you, had she shared with her parents yet her disillusionment with organized religion?
Not at all.
What did you make of that?
It really broke my heart to watch him say things about my sister and she's not there to defend herself. And for him to say that if she was religious, we wouldn't be together. My opinion is that my sister didn't go to church to be in the relationship. That does not mean that she doesn't believe in God. That does not mean that she doesn't say her prayers. That does not mean that she forgot who she was. She was a strong person. And if a situation was out of control for my sister, she would have packed up and left and came home or went to one of her friends. And she would not commit suicide. That I can bet my life on.
Well, it certainly didn't seem that she felt hopeless, helpless, powerless, forlorn, or without options or hope. Well, coming up, where does this family go from here? Will they ever get justice that they seek? We'll talk about that when we come back. Well, I'm back with Mary, Rebecca Zahau's sister, and her husband, Doug, and Keith Greer, the attorney that just tried the case for civil liability and won, representing the family. Now, at this point, will there be punitive damages involved in this case?
No. We waived punitive damages. Again, like Mary said, it's not about the money. He doesn't have any money anyway. It was about the verdict.
Is there a timeline for the decision to reopen this case? Are you in contact with law enforcement?
Yeah.
What are they telling you?
Yeah, and I've spoken with the sheriff, Sheriff Gore. He was very cordial. He seemed truly interested in re-looking at the evidence. I'm excited that he set up this team to look at it. There's a lot of evidence, and we have 6,000 pages of trial transcripts, thousands of pieces of evidence. It'll take, the sheriff said publicly, 90 days. There's a lot there.
As always, our thoughts and prayers are with you. I'm, again, sorry for your loss, and I know that that loss is as fresh to you today as it was when it happened, and will be until you feel like you have justice for your sister. And I know that, and I appreciate you coming here and give us an update on all of this. I want to thank all of my guests today, Mary, Doug, Keith, and Dr. Sarah Wecht. I know they will never stop fighting to uncover what they believe is the truth about what really happened to their Rebecca. Now, Adam Shacknai maintains that he is innocent of any wrongdoing and did not kill Rebecca Zahau. We reached out to his attorney for comment, and we did not hear back by our broadcast deadline. We will continue to follow this story. For more information about today's show, log on to drphil.com. Thanks for watching.
Rebecca has this aura around her. She can smile at you and makes you feel like everything's gonna be okay. She has a very positive influence on anybody around her. She loves children. She was able to get up in the morning and say, hey, let's go work out. Let's go do this. You know, life is short. We have to enjoy it. And we have to be happy.
Mary, she was close to Rebecca. They talked quite a bit. Even now, I can see where she wishes Becky would call her or if she could just talk to her. And Mary lost that.